respect for everyone's time. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Juan Marcano. I have the honor and pleasure of chairing the Transportation, Airports, and Public Works Committee. I'd like to introduce my vice chair.
I'm Councilmember Angela Lawson, and I'm an at-large council member and the vice chair of this great committee.
And we will be joined by Councilmember Medina shortly here once the tech issues get worked out. So first order of business, let's go ahead and approve the minutes from May 25th. Councilmember Lawson, do you have any changes or corrections?
I have no changes or corrections.
Okay. Neither do I. So those will go ahead and stand approved. Moving on, I don't see anything under consent, so let's move right into general business. So this is going to be 4A, the Parker Road Corridor Improvements Updates. And looks like we're going to have Tom Worker-Braddock and Stacy Shore. I apologize, Stacy, if that's not how I pronounce your last name, please correct me.
No, you did great.
All right, fantastic. So y'all will both be presenting on this one, so you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Marcano. I am going to introduce Stacy and then turn it over. Stacy is a project manager from DEA, and she is heading up the Parker Road Corridor improvements. This project is focused between Hampton Road on the south and Mississippi Avenue on the north. It's a collaboration between Arapahoe County, Aurora, and CDOT, looking at potential improvements. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy.
I am going to share my screen. I hit the wrong button. There you go. There we go. You guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. So, as Tom said, thank you for having us today to present the Parker Road Corridor Improvements project. So I'm going to give a little introduction and where we're at and what our plans are for the project, and then take any questions. So the project corridor is about 6 miles. So it's between Mississippi and the Hampton Avenues, which this is a state highway in this section. It's adjacent to Arapahoe County, also City of Aurora, and also City and County of Denver. And the project, as Tom said, is funded by the City of Aurora, Arapahoe County, and CDOT. So the primary goal of the project is to develop short-term and long-term alternatives and identify proposed projects for improving safety, enhancing multimodal travel, improving operational performance, and addressing the evolving and developing future transportation needs. So along the corridor. So that's taking into consideration the changing land uses along the corridor, but focusing on transportation improvements. The key steps in the analysis. First of all, we want to make sure we're identifying and working with stakeholders as we develop and evaluate improvements. We'll be conducting public outreach to collect input on the corridor conditions, which we've already had our first virtual town hall back in April, and also gathering feedback on proposed project recommendations. And I'll give a little more information on how we're doing that in a little bit. So we're identifying existing and future areas for improvement in the travel corridor for multimodal, operational, and safety perspectives. So we're looking at existing conditions, but then also looking into the future for future traffic conditions and land use. And we'll be evaluating alternatives and recommending proposed projects. And we're going to be focusing those proposed projects on the short term, so that meaning that that's where we're going to take a little extra time and evaluate funding and things like that for construction projects with the potential for immediate benefits. So with that, we'll prepare, as we look at improvements, we'll then prepare a prioritized list and really package them together as proposed projects with phasing and timeline types of recommendations, and look at available funding sources. So the agency coordination. So we have a few different committees, and teams. So our core team meets monthly and provides overall project guidance and leadership. So that means we talk about scope and schedule and where we're at with the budget, but also just where we're at in the approach of tasks and overall guidance on the project. And that has Arapahoe County, CDOT, and City of Aurora. And so Matt Callison and Tom Worker-Braddock are on that team for the city. Then we have the Technical Advisory Committee, so that's the TAC. And we have about 8 meetings planned. We may end up doing more, but that really involves specialties and technical discipline staff. So we really get more into the technical aspects of data and analysis. And so those have the same funding partners as Arapahoe County, CDOT, and Aurora, but then add City and County of Denver, RTD, and DRCOG technical staff to bring in their input since they have information and elements along the corridor. So that technical committee for the city brings in Chad Giron, I believe, from Land Use and Urban Design, and also brings in Steve Gomez and Carl Harlan from Public Works Traffic. So it brings in a few more technical staff, as well as Mac and Tom from the city into that team. And then we have our Policy Advisory Committee, and we have about 4 meetings with that group. We actually had one this morning, and that includes elected and other officials from the agencies you see here along the corridor. So the county, CDOT, Aurora, and again, City and County of Denver, RTD, and DRCOG. And Councilwoman Lawson is on that committee, as well as Councilwoman Combs. And Mac also comes. So public engagement meetings. We have 2 virtual town halls planned. Our first meeting was back in April. It was April 19th. And we introduced the project and gathered input regarding existing issues. People talked about kind of what they'd like to see improved along the corridor. And it was a really great meeting. We got a lot of information out of that. We have another planned meeting. We're going to try to get it in by the end of the year in late 2023. But at the second virtual town hall, we'll be presenting draft recommendations for comment at that point. So we wanted to make sure we were getting community input between those 2 points. So we are going to have a community focus group, and we're going to have 2 meetings of that group during the alternative development and evaluation. So with that, we're going to get input from residents, also people just generally using the corridor, bicyclists, pedestrians, transit users. We'll include some quasi-agencies, some advocacy groups that also really try to get the perspective of people that live and utilize the corridor, live along and utilize the corridor. So those 2 meetings, you'll see in the schedule in a little bit, but this will happen later this summer and then into the fall. And then we also will have individual and small group meetings as needed, which are more project focused, presentations, established group meetings like this one, or like if there's a specific development or business along the corridor that would like more input or more information, more focused information, we would definitely have an individual meeting with them. So wanted to give a flavor of the themes that we heard at that first virtual town hall back in April. So we had about 60 people join, and we also had an online map that we got quite a few comments along the corridor, specifically with issues and improvement suggestions. So some common themes were just lack of safety for cyclists and pedestrians, both along Parker Road, but a lot about crossing Parker Road, especially at intersections, also problem intersections just for traffic, for drivers along the corridor. We heard quite a bit about the desire to access parks, you know, that aren't necessarily right on Parker Road, but they are just on the other side of Parker Road from the residential areas. And so it just makes it difficult to walk across Parker Road. It really serves as a barrier to walking and biking. Also traffic speeds just make it feel uncomfortable to walk and bike in the area of Parker Road. We here saw a lot of, both in our observations on the corridor, but also heard a lot about mid-block crossings between signalized intersections. Also on the south end of the corridor was really where we heard about crashes, near misses, speeds, things like that. Really down between I-225 and Dartmouth. We got quite a bit of input about the homeless camps at the south end, that even though there are accommodations for pedestrians and bikes through the interchange and under 225, people don't feel safe biking or walking because their route is blocked. Also just vehicular issues with 225 in Hamden and those interchanges there, and just the weaving movements and long queues in that area. So as far as suggested improvements, they really go along with the issues, right? So we heard about suggestions for safer pedestrian crossings at intersections. People want to reduce the speed limit on Parker Road itself, signal timing and turn lane suggestions at specific intersections, increased maintenance. So hearing about snow and debris that gets up on sidewalks and makes it hard to walk along Parker Road, and also potholes that cause swerving on the street itself. The median, so there's areas where there's been median added, but so really extending that center median in areas. Separated sidewalks. So there was one request for a bike lane on Parker Road, that really courageous person that wants to ride their bike on Parker Road. But otherwise, a lot of people suggested just an improved and separated multi-use path. So one that isn't directly necessarily adjacent to the road, but separated. And some with different types of transit. So a tram or a trolley, and even personal rapid transit, which is actually, they described as utilizing a dedicated transit lane, but for things like autonomous vehicles, so that individuals could utilize that lane as well for personal rapid transit. So this is the schedule for the project. So as you can see we are now through kind of the corridor needs, and we are developing improvement options. We are going to be evaluating alternatives in the late summer and into the fall. We'll have draft recommendations end of the year. And as I said, we're going to try to squeeze in that second public meeting, virtual town hall by the end of the year, and then really work on project priorities and phasing with a report in early 2024. Did draft a corridor vision for the project, and that was with the core team as well as the technical advisory committee to really capture the overall vision for the Parker Road project corridor. So this is what we have, and it's really about focusing on the multimodal connectivity and access vision for the corridor, focusing on safety and also supporting evolving land use patterns, but not forgetting the need to improve and maintain that vehicular traffic operations, right? So that's why you see in the top paragraph, safe and efficient travel, accessible for people walking, biking, using mobility devices, riding transit, and driving. The corridor will provide convenient and comfortable travel. And a lot of times you'll see in the bullets below and up here, we say along and across the corridor. So capturing that crossing of the corridor for both people and goods, and really supporting that evolving land use patterns and really providing access to the natural and built environment. So the bullets below outline how the vision will be achieved. And that's with, again, offering various ways to travel while still improving safety and maintaining functionality for all travel modes. So really that balance, provide a comprehensive network of safe, comfortable, efficient, and well-maintained transit and accessible pedestrian and bike routes, again, along and across the corridor. Proactively support the development patterns with convenient and safe access for people walking, wheeling, or using transit. So looking at it, that means looking at the existing land use and also future land use opportunities for changing that access for people walking, biking, and transit. Looking at serving regional mobility and local accessibility for all modes. So that's really looking at the accesses, the driveways, and trying to get that balance of providing local access, but also serving regional mobility along Parker Road. Reducing Parker Road as a barrier for multimodal travel. So we want to focus on key areas for community resources and enhanced connections. So those are those parks or different land uses where we have residential on one side of the road and some really service land uses on the other side, retail and more neighborhood land use, and really providing that connection between those two areas on both sides of Parker Road. Utilize technology advances, supporting a highly functional multimodal corridor, and reflect and support the planning efforts and community vision of the corridor agencies and stakeholders to create a place to serve healthy living for the surrounding area. So really supporting the planning efforts of the agencies to make sure we're consistent with both transportation and land use planning efforts along the corridor. So next steps were, you saw that was a draft vision. It's good to stay draft throughout the project to make sure we bring in any input we receive or any changes as we evaluate improvements. But we will be developing also a purpose and need based on that vision, which is more specific and data-driven. So it'll really focus on safety and convenient and comfortable multimodal travel, and that will help us develop and evaluate improvement alternatives, really focused on that purpose and need and vision. And then we'll be establishing and convening those community focused group meetings. So like I said, the first meeting this summer to discuss the alternative development, and we give here a little shout out for members because we are trying to pull together as many people as we can to participate in that community focus group. So we're working on that right now. And with that, any questions and answers?
All right, thank you so much, Stacy, for the presentation. I'd like to defer to Councilmember Lawson first, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. I sit on the policy committee, so we did have a meeting, but I'll just kind of revamp what I did tell Stacy this morning or some of the comments I had. One of them was regarding ensuring that we, in the vision statement, which I think it's mentioned in a way, to make sure that we have these crosswalks that are a little bit more visible to people, drivers, and up on Parker Road, just throughout the whole corridor, even going to the Denver side, I see people walking out in the street. Sometimes people are really close to a crosswalk because they're not as maybe visible, and sometimes you don't see people from the left or the right. So I think that that's going to be really important. In regards to community meetings, I did emphasize the importance, especially, I know this is a benefit to everyone who goes through the corridor, who uses it to get to other places, but a lot of impact is around the people who live in the neighborhoods. So I want to make sure that they're included or outreaches to those particular, HOAs, associations, and community members. So those are some of the things I mentioned this morning to Stacy. So.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. So Stacy, I do have a bunch of questions and comments, so I hope you'll bear with me here. So I understand that this phase, for the project order, we're just going from Mississippi down to Hamden, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, where I'd like to start with this is, really, being a pretty frequent user of Parker, having tried to use the state park, as a pedestrian, by, going over to some of my friends' house, actually close to where Councilmember Lawson lives, in fact, and trying to get across. It's definitely taking your life into your own hands, I feel. So from my perspective, Parker is basically just a traffic sewer that is really hurting our ability to capitalize on the Cherry Creek State Park, which is, as you all know, a very desirable regional asset. And my concern is when we're trying to reimagine this corridor, if the primary use of this road is going to still be as a state highway with very high speeds, we're never going to make it safe. It's going to be one of our more dangerous corridors, just like we're seeing, increases in terms of traffic incidents and even fatalities along Chambers and, some of our big stroads. If you're familiar with the term strode. Yeah, okay, I'm seeing nodding, yeah. Throughout Aurora, and Parker is no exception. So, um, I guess my 2 cents on this is I would like to see us de-strode this corridor. I think Parker really is a good candidate for becoming a boulevard, where you can still facilitate traffic, but you slow it down by narrowing the drive lanes. You have dedicated feeder lanes, if you will, that can either bring you onto the higher speed central area or keep you on the more local connector routes. I frankly, I think we need grade separation along Parker, to make it more desirable for pedestrians and bicyclists to use. And the specific corridor that we are discussing today, in my ward anyway, we have a lot of commercial properties that front onto Parker directly. And most of those strip centers are struggling. I think that they have bad visibility because of the depth of their parking lots, which is more on the property owner than anything we're doing, but also that is, brought about by the high speeds on Parker. And that it's really used as a through route, not as a local business, friendly or pedestrian or multimodal route. So what I would like to see us do is, I'm looking at my GIS here on my second screen, more or less between Jewel down to, let's see here, Dartmouth, where we have commercial and residential properties that front directly onto Parker. I would love to see that area really begin to turn into a boulevard so that we're better able to serve our residents and businesses along that corridor, improve safety for them. Those feeder roads that I mentioned, those would be, basically have like residential level speeds. We could have traffic calming on those outer boulevard lanes. And then the Central Boulevard, you'd still have to either cross it at grade. Again, if money were no object, I would strongly suggest grade separation. But at least it's going to pretty dramatically narrow the crossing distance. And we could, even better facilitate safer crossings by having narrower crossing distances with bulb outs, something like that at those intersections, to make it a more desirable space for pedestrians and bicyclists to be. And as I mentioned, closer down, this ends at Hamden. So the interchange as it currently exists off of Parker onto Vaughn and Dam Road I'm honestly surprised we don't have daily serious accidents there. Almost every time I drive through there, either me or someone else has to slam on their brakes. I see a lot of road rage incidents happen there when folks are trying to get off of Hamden and cross all the way over to stay onto Parker. Because the first 2 lanes on the right side there are 225 interchange lanes. So that whole area certainly needs to be reconfigured. And I know that there's more of a challenge there because it becomes an elevated highway at that point with off ramps, but that I just see that becoming more and more hazardous as our population continues to grow, and as Parker specifically continues to grow. Because a lot of folks utilize Parker to get from Parker up to 225 and sometimes even into downtown. I know y'all already know that, but just wanted to state it for the record. So Yeah, in terms of the built environment as it stands there, I think we're really squandering a lot of potential for the city of Aurora by continuing to treat Parker Road as a state highway. And I know this is a conversation that we'd have to have with CDOT. We don't own Parker, so but I would hope that we could get a little more creative with how to repurpose this, because I don't think that we're going to make Parker a safer corridor necessarily just by reworking signals and improving the quality of our at-grade crossings and whatnot, because the ultimate vulnerabilities of this infrastructure are still going to be in place, which is high speeds, long crossing distances, and wide lanes, which encourage even higher speeds than what's posted. So yeah, I will get off my soapbox there, and I do want to acknowledge that Councilmember Medina has joined us. So I apologize, Councilmember Medina, but I'll go ahead and defer to you if you have any questions or comments on the presentation.
No, thank you. I think you guys have answered most of my questions. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. And I guess I'll have a follow-up question here then, Stacy. I know I just threw a lot at you there. Are these things that y'all have heard from some of the stakeholdering that you've already done?
Yes, they're definitely things that we've heard, especially the areas you're talking about. We've heard a lot about speeds and the feeling. We did do pedestrian bicyclist intercept surveys along the corridor, and observations. So we went out and did observations in May, and then also at specific locations went out and stopped people and asked them questions about what makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable with walking or biking along or across, Parker Road. And so we did get a lot of input, like you're talking about with the speeds, and just the amount of traffic and the proximity, right? So how close the traffic is to people walking along and across. We found that this is, I say walking and biking, but we have found this is more of a pedestrian corridor. So we are looking at biking, of course, but really, as far as multimodal, I mean, walking, biking, and transit, this corridor, we're seeing a lot of pedestrians, and walking is really the focus, right? And so really looking at, we heard a lot of about the parking lots, the fact that, it's hard to cross the large parking lots or even the smaller, tight parking lots like you're talking about, to access the businesses along there. So that's why, we're looking, we can't necessarily, with our project change that, but we can definitely, start to change the vision of the corridor itself so that it's easier to react and have those connections to that area when those changes can be made with that type of development. We have heard a lot about and already knew about the weaving and queues at the 225 interchange. So we are looking at things that could be possible there to try to reduce the number of lane changes that have to happen to make some of those really important movements. And try to simplify things. It's going to be a balance as far as that may mean not as much access for every movement, right? A lot of the issues there because there's so many movements with Juan and such. So we started looking at that. So there's definitely going to be benefits and trade-offs for everything. As far as what you're saying about the state highway, we've started looking at, one result of this being a state highway is there's a lot of acceleration and deceleration lanes along here because of the state access code. And so really starting the conversation about how much those are needed and how detrimental those are to the pedestrians and people biking across at the intersections, and just how wide it makes everything. And so maybe the opportunities to repurpose some of that space as well.
Great. Definitely happy to hear that. So yeah, I think that's all I have for you for the moment. So thank you so much for the presentation. I'm excited to see how this conversation develops. So it looks like this is going to be going on through 2024. So
yeah, into 2024 for sure. Yeah.
Councilmember Marcano, can I just ask Stacy a question? I just had a curiosity about what I call that area with Hamden and Parker Road. I call it the mousetrap because you're
Yeah.
that's what I call it, because they have a similar issue down in Denver when you're trying to cross over to Colfax and you're going, that way. They call it the mousetrap. So is there any way or thought process, and I'm not sure because of how traffic is, where, when people are coming from Hamden to get onto Parker Road, that there could be like the stop and go lights just for a couple minutes where people because everybody's coming like this and
Right.
you have to go north, you have to cross multiple, and it
Yes.
is very dangerous. So I just wanted to know, is that something that could be thought about to maybe slow that down, give people some time to merge over who are coming straight down on Parker Road? Or is that something that is not able to be done in that corridor?
So some of the things we're looking at is exactly what you're talking about. When you're coming north on Parker Road and you want to go north on 225, you force a double lane change and things like that. And a lot of it is because, yeah, these lanes come on. And so we're looking at changing how lanes are added versus a lane, making it more of a merge so that then you don't have that double lane change. Just trying to change maybe small things with that, making with the added lanes versus merging. Something like what you're talking about with like a ramp metering, maybe something that's possible. Just trying to look at different things. Now, can I say that what will end up acceptable to CDOT and things? I cannot, I cannot predict. However, we are trying, to look at things like that. Yes, we are not saying, forget it, that's not possible or anything like that. And yes, it is a mousetrap with Hamden and Vaughan and just all the different lanes, trying to look at repurposing how things, add and merge to try to help make things simpler and not so congested during those peak hours. And in the off-peak hours, it's an issue because of the speeds, because there's not as much traffic, but then you're trying to get through there and it's just so fast. So just trying to look at it in all different perspectives. Yes.
Thank you.
And actually, Stacy, I'm gonna throw one more at you here. So, I know that we're really discussing like the first phase down to Hamden, but I can't help but look at the entire corridor while we're having this conversation and, about how can we change Parker. And I'm wondering if, while we're doing this exercise, have we considered what I guess, for lack of a better term, effectively a highway removal might look like here? I have seen in other cities throughout the United States and throughout the world where they, when they have assets like, for example, Cherry Creek State Park, and a lot of residential and shopping areas and things like that that are not really well served by the current use of a major piece of infrastructure, where they've actually just ripped out the highway and turned it into, local routes, as I mentioned earlier, a boulevard, sometimes even just purely pedestrian and bike access ways as well. And then, I guess as part of that, what would the traffic flow look like coming from Parker? Where could we divert that? Like, would it be onto Arapahoe Road? Would folks who would normally take Parker up to 225, could we divert them up Chambers, Buckley, in our major arterials throughout the city instead of funneling everything onto Parker, which is part of what makes it such a challenging area, I think, to really reconfigure to serve the current uses in the area, right? Because this Parker is older than the city of Aurora, especially down in this part of town. So, I think that once upon a time it might have been well served as a highway, but now it really is a local, it's, trying to be everything to everybody. And I think that that's part of, obviously why y'all have stood up this exercise. But I did want to just throw that out there. Like, what if we, maybe entertain an option or propose an option to CDOT to basically turn this into a local serving boulevard as opposed to continuing to use it as a through route from Parker up to 225.
One of the things about this road that makes it so important, it is a regional connection. So it does, no, whether it's a highway or not, it is a regional corridor. It does go all the way from Colorado Springs all the way into downtown Denver as different roads and as different character, so changing the character, it may be something that can be done. I'm not saying that can't be done, but it just because of its continuous connectivity, it's going to continue likely to be a regional corridor. Now, whether that needs to be vehicular number one all the time along that entire length is not necessarily what I'm saying. But just the way it's laid out, like you said, and Cherry Creek Reservoir, it's a great park, but it presents some constraints as far as this is a corridor on the east side, a continuous corridor that parallels, I-25. And so I think the importance of the regional connectivity also cannot be denied necessarily.
No, I appreciate that. So I know it's a challenge, but just wanted to drop my 2 cents. So thank you again for hearing me.
Yeah, thanks though. I think you're totally correct as far as the character of different areas, and the fact that it is along Cherry Creek State Park, should be considered as far as the importance of different modes and the character and the use of the roadway corridor through there.
Yeah. Again, if money were no object, I would love to find a way to bury Parker Road along the so that we can create a big plaza area there to really, provide easy access to the trailheads to the park and to really revitalize that area around the East Bank Shopping Center. But that's, again, if money were no object, and if the state, we're going to just say yes to whatever we propose. But right. Well, thank you again. And just one last check-in with my colleagues. Do y'all have any other comments or questions?
And if I can just add one thing, Councilmember Marcano.
Sure, go ahead, Tom.
This study or this effort is a really good vehicle, if you will, for those discussions between Arapahoe County, CDOT, and the city of Aurora. So I think there will be a lot of good ideas thrown about, and it's going to take a lot of discussion for those three entities as well as the public to reach a common vision and determine the best alternative for this corridor. But it is a good effort, and we're excited about it. And when it gets back to something that Councilmember Lawson said about engaging the local neighborhoods along this corridor. In fact, just today, I know the consulting team was reaching out directly with City of Aurora staff to get a list of those pertinent HOAs and neighborhood organizations to better bring them into this effort.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. All right. So thank you again for the presentation, and I'm excited to see how this project moves forward. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacy. All right. So moving on to miscellaneous matters, I did have a question. I learned earlier that the R line got struck by lightning yesterday during our nice hailstorm, and that we had a meeting, I guess, or maybe are still having a meeting with RTD. So I was wondering if anyone could provide an update on that.
Sure, Councilmember Marcano. We did just have a meeting with RTD to talk about a variety of different things, including the R line. And yes, there was a lightning strike, and there were conflicting understandings of if everything was under repair. But the last piece that we heard is that everything has been taken care of. I know Carly's on here. Sometimes she gets better or different information, Carly. So I might put you on the spot to see if you've heard anything different.
No worries. Thanks, Cindy. No, I haven't heard anything different on that one. So I think if we do hear anything, we can send an update. But yeah, I haven't heard anything else.
Okay. So we believe it's all taken care of.
All right. And where was the strike? Just out of curiosity.
You know, Carly?
I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know that we got those specifics from them.
Councilmember Marcano, so the message from RTD that I received was that the lightning strike was in the area of Peoria and 13th, which is where they are temporarily running bus shuttles. between Peoria and 13th stations as the repairs are being made. Beyond that, the details of the actual incident itself, we don't really have much beyond that.
Gotcha. So it is impacting service, but there's a bus bridge.
Yes, correct.
Great, thank you. All right. Any other miscellaneous matters from my colleagues?
And Councilmember Marcano, just to kind of add on the RTD, your question of our meeting. So city staff today kicked off a regular quarterly meeting that we'll be having with RTD to discuss various agency matters, projects, staff coordination in an effort to stay proactive and build better bridges with the agency to get better information on these matters as they occur, but also proactively plan and stay up to speed on what RTD has planned that could impact Aurora. So we had our first kickoff meeting today. It was a really good meeting, talking through and getting updates on our line and other, cross project matters like the Colfax BRT, among others. And so our hope is we're going to continue that conversation on a quarterly basis. And so our next meeting we're looking at will probably be September timeframe.
Great. I'm really excited to hear that. I know that communication has been something that's frustrated a lot of us. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. We are trying to stay ahead of that.
Yeah, phenomenal. Thank you. All right. Any other miscellaneous matters from staff or my colleagues? All right. Seeing none. What have we got on the agenda for our next meeting?
So I put a call out last week. We actually don't have any items on next month's agenda as of right now.
Okay. So if that doesn't change, then we'll probably just go without a July meeting. Alrighty. And then for the time being, then our next meeting, I think I have it on the calendar for July 27th. Is that still correct? 1 p.m. All right. And if we have items to discuss, we will meet then. And if we do not, well, let's see if does that work for my colleagues.
I don't know, but if we do want to add something, do we just go through you, Chair Marcano?
Yeah, you could just suggest it to me and make sure that you copy staff on it so that we can get it out.
This is just a little different for me because Pfizer, I make sure we have stuff. So, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Okay. All right. But it looks like currently it's the 27th at 1 p.m. So I believe both of y'all have that open on your calendar. All right, great. So we will put that on the agenda for July. And with that, if you have any topics, please feel free to reach out to me. And we will see you all next week at CML. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.